Welcome, everybody, to the Padres.
Mets preview. I'm Wardy.
I'm Hog, and the Padres face off the Mets today in Queens.
Yeah, we have a lot to get into. We're going to be breaking down our raw analysis to this upcoming series that starts tonight at the time of most of you guys watching this. Of course, make sure to check me out, WardyNYM, if you're watching this from Hogwatch's channel, and same thing vice versa. If you're watching here on WardyNYM, make sure to check out Hogwatch. Borna is the #1 Padres YouTuber out there, and I like to say that I'm the #1 Mets YouTuber. We both do very similar style when it comes to post-game shows. Some say. I could be wrong, right? But, Borna and I have been good buddies for a while. We first collaborated last year. That's why many of you guys know me on Borna's channel, and some of you guys know, of course, Hog on the WardyNYM channel. So we're going to be collaborating each game this series. That's the goal. And basically how it's going to go down is whoever is the loser of each game, if, say, the Padres win game one, then I have to go on Borna's stream after I stream for at least a half hour on my channel, and same thing vice versa. So we'll be collaborating all series long. Very excited to get into it, but more than anything, Borna, how you doing, my man?
Well, first of all, Friar Faithful, looks like Wardy's going to be coming on the Hogwatch every single game this series because I know the Padres are bringing out the broom. So
pump the brakes, all right? It's not the wild card again. At least I hope not.
In all seriousness, man, everything's good. I finally feel settled into this baseball year. I know we've kind of each gotten 10 games down our sleeve, and some ups and some downs for both of our respective teams. Again, the big storyline today is the NL wildcard Game 1 rematch between Yu Darvish and Mad Max Scherzer. Wasn't so proud on your end last time, but listen, it's a brand new season, brand new story, and a brand new baseball team for both sides here, right? I'm going to start talking about the San Diego Padres, and I'd love to hear your take on the New York Mets so far through the first 10. It's been very up and down for the San Diego Padres. Some underwhelming series against the Colorado Rockies, a little split with the D-backs, who are probably going to be a pretty good team this year, but then they made a really, really, really resounding play the last 4 nights, taking 3 out of 4 from the Braves at Truist Park. A lot of people saying potentially the class of the National League. So you see all the power rankings today. They have Padres at #1. I hate all that stuff because it's April 10th. So let's not, get all on our high horse and excited, but looks like these two teams are going to be playing and competing in October, likely in the National League. So what are your thoughts on your Mets so far to start the 2023 campaign?
Yeah, thoughts on the Mets. And first off, Padres, I appreciate, taking 3 or 4 from the Braves. I was texting you heading into that series. Please do that at minimum. And you guys did in a pretty impressive fashion. You could have even swept that series if it wasn't for what the Orlando Arcia walk-off in game 1. But yeah, my thoughts on the Mets are pretty simple. Off to a 500 start, 5-5 through the first 10. Just has not been consistent with anything thus far. The offense has shown its flashes in the most recent series. Pete Alonso already has 5 home runs this season, 5 home runs in the past 5 games. As a matter of fact, the rest of Mets, however, have 5 home runs combined. So the power is still through Alonso Lindor, and that's the biggest thing we're following this year to see if we can get it from young kids and Francisco Alvarez, who's just called up for us, top catching prospect in baseball, arguably the #1 prospect in all baseball still. We'll see how he does in this series, how much playing time he gets. But pitching-wise, that's been a big question for us because leading the way right now has been Kodai Senga and Tyler McGill. You're going to be avoiding Senga in this series, so I know you're happy about that.
Filthy. He's
been awesome, man. Yeah. Very happy with him thus far. But McGill as well, looking forward to him in game 3. Justin Verlander still on the shelf for a little bit longer. Could be retroactive as soon as tomorrow. But, I mean, Max Scherzer in tonight's start, as we're recording this right now, I mean, he has right around a 6.5 ERA, and it's 11 innings so far this year. His velo isn't down or anything like that, just not great location, hanging too many pitches and really giving up some hard contact. So, obviously, as a Mets fan, I hope that we see Max of old today. We could see the Max that is old, the one that we saw in the wild card game last year, in which I was in attendance, and so were you. Unfortunately, it only benefited one of us, and you got the score rate of that game, which genuinely pisses me off when I interviewed pregame that day.
Rain Man, baby. Rain Man.
But yeah, my final thoughts on the Mets right now is that it's early. I just hope that they come out with a competitive series here. I think that this is easily a coin flip, can go either way. It wouldn't shock me if the Padres win by any stretch, nor would it shock me if the Mets do, because even though the Padres just took 3-4 from the Braves, it's early in the season. We know that. I mean, at this point last year, the Mets were deemed as one of the top dogs in baseball at that point. They were ranked in first and everything throughout the first month of baseball, from offense to pitching to everything. And, now they're facing early adversity, unlike last year. So I'm interested to see how they overcome that, if at all.
Yeah, I mean, at the time of recording, again, we have some news coming out of San Diego that Robert Suarez felt a little pinch in his arm, so they're going to really slow back his return. And if you can argue,
I did not know that.
Yeah, if you can argue 3 out of the 4 Padres losses are because they couldn't bridge the gap to Josh Hader. So losing someone like Robert Suarez for an extended period of time. Listen, every team has injuries, but I'm not going to play excuses here.
We got 10 on the IL already. Yeah, we got injuries, right?
and that's a massive, massive blow to this bullpen, because losing Suarez in a way degrades the value of Josh Hader, because if you you can't get him the ball, he's not coming out there to pitch. So Padres are probably 8-2 if they have Robert Suarez. He's probably going to be out at least another 5 to 6 weeks. The guy they just gave a big contract in the offseason. They're missing half of their pen as well with Adrian Morejon on the 60-day IL. Drew Pomeranz, apparently, we thought he was going to pitch 10 years ago. I don't know if I'll ever see him in San Diego. And, of course, offensively, no Tatis, no Musgrove yet. And Yu Darvish tonight going to be making his second start of the season. When I take a look at his first start with you, you're going to look at the box score. Padres fans are going to be like, wow, he was good. But he was still trying to get back into the workflow of things, allowed way too many free bases, was walking guys all over the place. And listen, that comes at a cost. When you're not pitching that much because of the WBC, it's going to take time, especially if you're an innings eater, to really build your way up. So Bob Melvin's been very cautious, been very gentle with building up Yu Darvish. But today he's going to need you to be a big innings eater because we know Mad Max is looking for a big bounce back outing for him and the Mets. So I take a look at this Mets offense so far. It's been really up and down. I think they're really fine. And correct me if I'm wrong with Tommy Pham leading off. I know he's ran into a few balls this year. They're still waiting for Lindor to get going a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
Pete Alonso,
Pham's a guy that he'll be starting one game at most this series. At least that's what my hope is.
Tommy Pham?
No. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on him so far this year?
Oh, yeah, that's true, because I'm talking to a Padres content creator here, right? I mean, Pham, he wasn't our first choice, nor was he second, nor our third. But every other guy that the Mets wanted for that fourth outfielder type signed deals for less money even, because the Mets had the highest offer on the table for like Adam Duvall, but he wanted everyday playing time, and now he's thriving in Boston. Good for him, right? Same thing goes with other. I know you would have liked Duvall too. So Pham was one of those guys where he was more of a last resort because all the other feasible options the Mets were looking for that fourth outfielder type that could split time at DH, they were given everyday jobs elsewhere, and you have to commend them for that. The same way that Lugo, who's off to a great start with the Padres, only signed there because he was guaranteed a spot to be a starter to begin the year. Same thing with Trevor Williams for the Nationals and so on and so forth. So yeah, Pham, don't love him. There's nothing flashy about him. When he strikes out brutally, but he has had some pop. He did help out, especially in one game in the first series of this year against Miami, in which he had himself a pretty nice game, including a dead center home run, if I'm not mistaken. So Pham, not flashy, nothing crazy, solid off the bench, but definitely not a guy that I want starting every day. And we'll see how much looks he gets in the series, because there will be game 2, especially lefty versus lefty. And with Blake Snell being the expected starter in game 3 for the Padres right now, we could see a decent amount of Pham, as the Mets are not going to have Vogelbach starting in DH for games 2 and 3 facing southpaws, because he's normally against a righty guy. And I want to ask you, Borna, what's your thoughts, especially about this game 1? Because pitching-wise, this one could easily make or break the series before we really start to tax that bullpen. And Max and you both come out and give you, say, 6 to 7 solid innings apiece. Then you get on to the game 2s. Peterson is not notorious for going deep. He walks guys, big strikeout guy, but walks quite a bit. Weathers, who's the rook for you guys, I'd expect that he wouldn't go too deep as well, even though the Mets, when it comes to lefties, they're so Jekyll and Hyde. He could go 8 shutty for all we know. And then game 3, Miguel on the bump for the Mets, another guy that isn't notorious for going deep into games to this point, versus Blake Snell, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the Padres so desperately need Yu Darvish to go deep in this game. I mean, they are relying on Bill Krismat, who had a 16 ERA coming into yesterday's game, to give him 2 innings to close the door against the Braves, albeit they had a big lead. But Bob Melvin doesn't have many more buttons to press when it comes to this bullpen, because they're all on the shelf right now. So when you're looking at guys he's pulling out there, he's bringing out guys that people didn't even know his name 5 weeks ago, and Domingo Tapia, relying on him to pitch high leverage situations. Tim Hill, who has not had the best outing this year. Steven Wilson, who was an Uber driver 1 year ago, is probably our second highest leverage arm in this bullpen behind Josh Big Nuts Hader. So it's like there are a lot of pieces in this pen that are not good. So what does that mean? Oh man, it's so imperative for these starters to go deep. And that's why it's been such a nice luxury and surprise for Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo to go this deep into games, because it's been preserving this bullpen that's already taxed as of April 10th. Right? As of April 10th, the bullpen is extremely taxed for the Padres. So I cannot...
As it is for the Mets, too. I mean, we're in a very similar boat. I mean, yeah, because multiple of our relievers started the year on the shelf. I mean, having the best closer in baseball out for the year before the year even begins certainly isn't ideal. And now we've had other relievers that have been on the shelf a little bit as well. We've got more guys that can be innings eaters for us. I mean, basically, the guys that were supposed to be our lawn arms out of the pen this year are already starting the year on the IL. So a total of 10 guys on the injured list for the Mets. And every single one of them, if I'm not mistaken, is a pitcher, either a starter or a reliever. So, I mean, the injury bug is full with the Mets. They taxed their bullpen early. It's led to guys like Brooks Raley, who's a new lefty for us, to, have a strong first couple outings. And then he got rocked in the last couple. Drew Smith, another guy being more of a, a higher leverage guy for the Mets this year, has not looked sharp thus far. John Curtis, who was out last year with Tommy John surgery, has looked pretty solid so far this year. Had a really nice outing the other day, getting himself 4 outs and a win over Miami. So yeah, bullpen wise, we're both dealing with the taxing as well, because none of our starters have gone deep. Nothing past 6 innings. And the guys that have gone 6 innings, I'm pretty sure the Mets, if I'm not mistaken, have only had 2 games where their starters have won 6 innings. And then when you have Carlos Carrasco, who is anything but good, especially to start this season, it doesn't help the cause. So yeah, I mean, you start the year with pitching depth, and now we're already having Tyler McGill, who I love, but is slotted as our number 3 right now, filling in for JV until he returns. So it just shows you how much things change.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'd say the only thing that I'd love and that can counteract these pitching, I guess, woes or injuries is, at least on my end, this Padres offense so far. I mean, last night, 13 hits and 38 ABs. I mean, that's over 333 batting average. When this offense is playing to the capabilities that they can, and listen, it's not going to be every night. It doesn't matter if your starter goes 4 or 5, because then you can just throw in the low leverage guys like a Chris Matt for 2 to 3 innings. I mean, last night, you take a look, it wasn't just the top of their order, but Ha-Seong Kim getting into the action, Trent Grisham running into his 3rd ball this year. A lot of Padre fans, Wardy, are very, very excited about Trent Grisham this year, because I know he had a really, really down year last year, but with his plus defense and his plus power, a lot of Padre fans think this guy's going to hit 230, 240 this year, hit 25 home runs, and obviously plays Gold Glove defense. You're immediately one of the better center fielders in baseball with those kind of numbers. So the Padres are very, very excited about Trent Grisham this year. And Ha-Seong Kim, man, every time I see him at the plate, I'm like, why is his approach like this? His swing is still so flawed. But every time I see him in the box score, it's another one hit game, another 2-hit game, another homer. So it's looking like the Padres, especially when they get to T-Sprack, are going to have so much depth in that lineup. So that's been the one thing that's been able to help me sleep at night with the pitching woes, with the pitching injuries. If they're able to get this kind of offensive output, it's very exciting. Now, albeit yesterday was against Dylan Dodd, but they scored a few on Spencer Strider. They scored a lot on Charlie Morton. So today this is the ultimate test. Can they score against Max Scherzer? They were able to do so in October. Will they be able to do so in April? Stay tuned.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was beautifully put. This Padres offense has absolutely been killing it lately. To say I envy you is an understatement. I mean, when you look at the amount of star potential you have in that lineup without even Tatis involved yet, like I picked Juan Soto heading into the year as my NL MVP, and I'm going to stand by that until further notice right now. I really think he's going to have a monster year, really show what Padres fans were expecting out of the jump last year, in which he was still fairly underwhelming that we saw. And going from the Padres offense to the Mets offense, I mean, it's night and day in regards to what our expectations are right now. Because if we had, say, a Carlos Correa, not to beat this drum anymore, but just trying to make my point here, with that acquisition, we felt unbelievably confident and comfortable knowing that we got that one more supreme bat in the middle of this lineup or towards the top of this lineup that can be effective the way that we were initially expecting and hope it would be. Now that that's out of the equation, we're currently in the debate similar as last year, where this Mets offense is good. They were top 5 in baseball last year. I don't expect them to be top 5 this year at the rate that they're at, but they're going to have to make decisions fairly soon. I mean, Francisco Alvarez is up array, which I'm excited about. The kid has so much raw potential with his power at 21. That's why he's already deemed as the top prospect in baseball, if not top 5 at the very least. But then Brett Beatty, who's the number 1 third base prospect in baseball, aside from Gunnar Henderson, who just shifted over the position. If Eduardo Escobar, who has been off to an underwhelming start, killed the Padres last year, though, so maybe this could be
Cycle Eddie.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens on that front. But Eddie's another guy where we're kind of waiting. He's like a ticking time bomb before Beatty is inevitably brought up this year. So I foresee this Mets offense looking pretty different by time we get to the trade deadline and thereafter. It's just a matter on how many of those things are going to be different from internally with our young kids or externally if we give our kids enough of a leash, see that doesn't work, and see what is out there via the trade market. So yeah, this team, to be honest, I really don't have a certain expectation for them this series. This is the first time they're playing a team this year nearly to the magnitude of the Padres. Like, we haven't played the Phillies, we haven't played the Braves, we haven't played any top team in the division. We played the Marlins, but that's the Marlins, right? We got smoked by the Brewers because the Mets are 3-18 in their past 21 games in Milwaukee. So I
also
mean,
the Brewers are smoking everybody. Let's not just put your team under the bus.
I agree, but I will say this: the Mets just are, for whatever reason, their kryptonite is Milwaukee. I don't know if it's the cheese curds. I don't know if it's the beer. It's something. But this offense has been Jekyll and Hyde.
Wardy, I would say before you even talk about, external options like prospects, trade deadline, there's some guys in your lineup that are just going to start hitting more. Like Francisco Lindor is way too good of a hitter to be hitting 206, right? Like Juan Soto is too good of a hitter to be hitting 212. Like those are some guys who are just I don't know how good they're going to be this year, but we know they're going to be better than what they've been. So
Yeah,
there should be some optimism internally, especially when the Mets get JV back. You know, they're going to be able to line up with Scherzer, JV, Senga. Your offense doesn't even need to be that stellar to win a baseball game every fifth day when those guys are on the bump. So
that's what you would think. That's what you would
hope.
Again, I'm not trying to sit here and be a pessimist or anything because I'm not. It's imperative for the Mets to take advantage of strong pitching when they got it. When they've gotten it from Senga, that's been awesome. They certainly have. McGill, same thing as applied. McGill just eating 5-6 solid innings his first 2 starts. But then when JV's in the fold, they need to make sure that they avoid what we've seen for the previous 5 years when he's healthy and Jacob deGrom. You know, you get a stud start, 6-7 innings of 1 run or no run ball. Got to make sure you have that offensive production behind them. So yeah, like my expectation heading into the series, I think is very different from yours in the sense of you're like, all right, we just kind of steamrolled Atlanta, and Atlanta, we should win at minimum 2 of the 3 next games here in Queens versus me. We're like, I don't know what's going to happen. Genuinely. Like as long as the Mets don't get swept, it's not the end of the world for me. But I do think if Max can get back to the Max that we know and love, then it's going to make for a very interesting series because this early in the year, so much happens. I mean, just talk for a minute about this Padres team from last year, how, you know, there was a point where it's like, are they even, you know, going to make the inconsistencies you guys had down the stretch similar to 2021? It was like, what's going to happen come playoff time, right? And then come playoff time, we saw what happened on your front. So it's a long season. It's certainly a marathon and not a sprint.
And Padre fans know more than anybody else that you never know what's going to happen. I mean, the Dodgers won 111 games last year. We won, 88, 89 or whatever, and we beat them. So it's like
Dodgers for a second.
What's that?
I was trying to be the Dodgers for a second. That's why I was joking about.
Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, that it means like, listen, these games are important, but it's all really just about getting into the postseason and seeing what happens from there. Because we are an example of it. The Phillies are an example of it. The 2021 Braves are an example of it, right? So it's just all about getting in. But it's important to see kind of how these trends unfold. So when I look at this series, listen, you know, one big key to the series for someone like myself as a Padre fan is I'm looking at Juan Soto. I'm looking at someone like Juan Soto, and I'm saying, Juan, let's start ramping up now. Let's start heating up now. You're kind of the piece of this offense that when you're clicking, we are an unbeatable offensive team. So that's kind of my one key to the series. Is Juan Soto starting to wake up? We think so in San Diego. He had a better series against the Braves. He went deep. He got robbed from 1 homer, and he should have went deep again last night. So I'm looking at Juan Soto, and I'm hoping he can wake up. I'm asking you, Tyler, from a pitching standpoint, who do you think has the edge in this series? I think you can argue Scherzer. Darvish is a wash, maybe lean Max Scherzer. But I want to ask, you know, who do you think has the pitching edge in this 3-game set?
I honestly think it's going to go to the Padres because I anticipate Darvish to have a stronger outing than Max tonight. Obviously, I hope I'm wrong, right? So this is not me trying to do a
you're hedging.
Like, I really do think that the pitching will be, the biggest breaker is going to be tonight, but then the next 2 games, complete toss-ups. Like Weathers, ideally the Mets should be able to get on him and get on him early, but it's the fact that he's a lefty where I don't know what to expect. The Mets, when it comes to lefties, have been notoriously inconsistent for the past number of years now, and it's also hilarious how the Mets' 2 best offensive outings up until this most recent series were against Sandy Alcantara and Corbin Burns. So I don't know what that tells you, right? It doesn't mean that the Mets are destined to beat up on Darvish today and then get shelled by Weathers and Snell's going to look back to his second half Snell from last year. I'm not sure, but it's that lefty aspect in games 2 and 3 where I'm really uncertain because with both Peterson and McGill, it's just making sure that walk rate's down, especially Peterson because he gave up 5 over 4 his last outing, which was in Milwaukee, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be interesting to follow. But yeah, I would give the slight edge to the Padres, and I would be lying if I said that I didn't give a slight edge to the Padres in the series overall. But as a normal optimist, when we're only 10 games in the season, no outcome will shock me in this one. I'm just hoping for the best and looking forward to what going to be hopefully a better matchup than that wild card series. That's for sure.
All I'm going to say is ESPN matchup predictor has the Mets winning every single game in terms of percentage. So I guess we'll find out.
Know baseball. Get out of here with that nonsense.
I'm looking at Ryan Weathers on Tuesday, man. And Padres fans, I know if you're watching, make sure you guys go check out again Wardy's channel on YouTube at WardyNYM and myself at the Hog Watch. Please subscribe, hit the like button. on both channels. But on Tuesday, I'm looking at Ryan Weathers. We got our first action of MLB on TBS baseball of the year with Ryan Weathers against David Peterson. So, with Ryan Weathers, this is the guy now who made his major league debut back in 2020 in the NLDS against the Dodgers. And then he had a really tough 21. He got hurt, had a really, really tough 22 getting shelled in El Paso. Because of the injuries, Weathers has had to step up, and he kind of won the job over Jay Groom to kind of be that plug-in substitute starter until No Joe is ready to get back on the mound, who also had a little bit of a minor setback, injury bugs. But in all seriousness, with someone like Ryan Weathers, we are looking for him to give you 4 to 5 innings. Where is his command looking? He's been kind of all over the place with his command. When he's pinpointing his pitches, when he's pinpointing his fastball, he can be a very, very good southpaw in this league. And I think him and Blake Snell have similar strengths and similar weaknesses. Someone like Blake Snell, Wardy, listen, we know who this guy is in the second half. He's a Cy Young caliber pitcher. In the first half, he's a guy who makes me want to bang my head on the wall sometimes. And to be quite frank with you, this is a Padres rotation so far this year that's consisted of Blake Snell, Michael Wacha, Seth Lugo, Ryan Weathers. And you can argue that Blake Snell's been the worst starter out of the bunch, and which is unbelievable. And that this team is 6-4. That Blake Snell.
How do you think we feel with Max being our worst so far? It's the same.
It's very similar synergies. But it's not even probably. It's definitely that's been the scenario with Blake Snell. So I think with him, Padres fans are hoping this is kind of a bounce back opportunity for him, a bounce back start. And we'll find out. I want to ask you before we wrap it up here, what Met so far have you been the most pleasantly surprised by to start the 2023 season?
Most pleasantly surprised. That's
putting you on the spot a little bit here.
I'll actually say, given the lack of consistency with the Mets rotation right now, I got to go with Miguel. And that's not just because I'm good friends with his family and all that stuff. Shout out to you, Julie, member on the channel. It really is because he's really helped kind of paved the way along with Senga early on. The Mets have not had much consistency with their pitching thus far. He gave out a solid Bulldog outing his first start of the year. This was a guy that was fully expected to start opening day for the Syracuse Mets. He lost the rotation battle with him and David Pearson in spring training because he was walking everybody, because he was working on his arsenal. Curveball was great, but his other pitchers, gained down and away to those righty hitters and just couldn't command that strike zone well. So while he was working on stuff, which is what you're supposed to do in spring, it ended up not benefiting him to start the year. But Justin Verlander being out with a very minor injury, he will be back before the month's end. I'm very confident in that. Miguel's coming in now, and with the way he's playing, and once JV's back, there is a very real possibility that Miguel earns that potential spot as a fifth starter, moves Carrasco to the pen, a long arm, until, the cookie either gets figured out or he's inevitably parred with, So I got to give it to Miguel. He's been eating innings for the Mets, and that's very important for this team, that when you look at the depth of their bullpen, it's not like what it was to start last year. And once more, when you lose your star closer who can come in and get you 6 outs on any given night if you need to, like without a problem, it hurts. David Robertson's solid. I don't mind David at all, but we signed him to not be the closer entering the year. So there's a lot of turmoil with this team on the pitching front, and it's definitely been quite the toss-up in the expectation. But the one certainty thus far through a couple starts is that Tyler McGill and Kodai Senga respectively have led the way for this rotation. So hoping for another strong start from McGill in Game 3, which easily could be the series decider.
Yeah, I was going to guess you were going to say Kodai Senga, honestly. I've been saying...
Yeah, no, I kind of... Senga is as advertised for me. So he's definitely looked more comfortable faster than I would have expected. But, how he's performing is what you saw overseas, right? So, I'm not shocked by that. McGill, who when there was no anticipation of him even starting the year in the rotation, to come on out and basically help carry the way for us, that's why I'm giving him a slight edge, because expectations were different heading into the year between the two, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd say for the Padres, and it's probably Nelson Cruz, especially after last night.
Yeah, big 3-for-4 game last night, huh?
This is a guy who only signed for $1 million. I'm sure he got more offers. And the Padres, he mentioned that over the last few years, he was struggling seeing the ball at the plate because he needed to get LASIK eye surgery. Guy gets eye surgery, now has 20/20 vision. Well, man, it's looking pretty clear
Eddie
so
Rosario
far.
Out here.
What's that?
Same thing happened with Eddie Rosario for the Braves last year.
Yeah. So I'm really looking at kind of that platoon, what's been working for the Padres. It's been that Nelson Cruz, Matt Carpenter platoon. And a lot of people question the Matt Carpenter signing. Again, let's not forget it's very early into the season. It can be a very different story when we're talking about a month from now. But as of right now, 10 games in, the Matt Carpenter, Nelson Cruz platoon has been absolutely beautiful. If you're facing a righty, you're going to start Matt Carpenter. If you're facing a lefty, you're going to start Nelson Cruz. Both plus power options, both guys you can just slide in that DH role. It's been perfect. I also been loving to see what Hassel and Gibbs are doing at the bottom of the order, but I'm still a little bit worried about our pitching scenario. I'm very worried about our bullpen situation, and it's kind of ironic. Heading into the year, the Padres had probably arguably the best bullpen in the National League, or some were saying. So, for me, the fact that that's a worry point is, I guess, good, but I'm very, very worried about the pen just because of the stability and how much these guys are going to hold up. But listen, so far so good. I think we're going to learn a lot about both of these teams at the end of this 3-game set.
Yeah, for sure, man. And one final thing I want to say before we wrap things up and get out of here is, offensively for the Mets, my biggest thing I'm looking for is just the depth of the lineup. I mean, it's been so Jekyll and Hyde to start the year as well. It feels like when we're getting Alonso hitting his bombs and Lindor, that we're just not getting enough production outside of those two, pop-wise. And that will be something that will be an ongoing issue throughout the year until it's rectified internally or externally for this team. But more than anything, I mean, when you look at the bottom, Mark Cannon needing to make sure that he grinds out his at-bats, gets on base however which way, right? Jeff McNeil, the reigning NL batting champ, need him to continue to grind out his at-bats and get to the Jeff McNeil that we all know and love and fully expect him to get to, just not off to necessarily the start that we were anticipating heading into the year. He currently has a 250 average. He's at least a 300 type guy. So we'll see how he does. This is a big series for him. And Eduardo Escobar, I mean, I have my eyes locked on him because he has been so inconsistent. When I was at the Mets home opener a couple days ago, he was ground ball machine. Didn't matter if there were guys on or off, just ground ball to third every single time. Then game 2 was just missed a home run and then gets an opposite field home run later in the game. Nice monkey off of his back. And then, yesterday more back to the Eduardo of old. So he's another guy where if we can get anything out of the way that he hit a cycle in San Diego last year, then I'll be very happy. Just depth for this offense is vital if they want a fighting chance to really make this a pain in the neck for the Padres in this 3-game set.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's WardyNYM. I'm born AK Hog. Remember, Mets win, I'll be on WardyNYM. Padres win, WardyNYM will be on the Hog Watch. It should be a very, very fun 3-game set. A nice litmus test for both teams to start the 2023 season. And this time the showdown's in Queens. So everyone, be well. We're signing out. Peace. Cool.
Awesome. Check